It all began on October 28, 1955, in one of the countless cities of the world, Seattle, Washington, USA. A baby was born in a quiet hospital room. No one knew then that this little child, who couldn't even speak a word yet, would one day teach the world a new language, the language of computers. No one could have imagined that this boy, with curious eyes and a restless mind, was destined to change how humanity thinks, works, and lives. At that time, computers were giant machines and locked inside laboratories and universities, accessible only to scientists and experts. They were expensive, complex, and far away from the common man, but there was one young mind who believed otherwise. He believed that every home and every desk deserved a computer, that technology should not belong only to the powerful, but to everyone. That boy's dream would soon ignite a revolution that would connect the world, transform industries, and open the doors of the digital age. That boy was none other than Bill Gates, the man who turned imagination into innovation, code into creativity, and computers into companions. Today, we'll unfold the journey of a man who didn't just build Microsoft, he built the foundation of our modern world. So fasten your seatbelts, because we are about to dive deep into the life of the man who changed the way the world works. The visionary who taught machines to think, Bill Gates, the legend who coded the future, William Henry Gates III, known to the world as Bill Gates, was born on October 28, 1955, in Seattle, Washington, United States. He would one day become one of the most influential figures in the history of technology and business. But long before the creation of Microsoft, before the world of personal computing and digital revolution, Gates was simply a curious and brilliant child in a stable yet ambitious American family. Family background: Bill Gates was born into a middle-upper-class family that valued education, discipline, and public service. His father, William Henry Gates Sr., was a prominent lawyer in Seattle, known for his intellect and community involvement. His mother, Mary Maxwell Gates, was equally impressive. She was a teacher, served on corporate boards such as United Way International and First Interstate Bank, and was deeply engaged in volunteer work. Bill was the only son, with two sisters, Christy, the eldest, and Libby, the youngest. The Gates family environment was structured but nurturing. Dinner conversations often revolved around current events, leadership, and world affairs. His parents encouraged healthy competition, urging their children to set goals and pursue excellence in every field. A curious and analytical child from a young age, Gates displayed an extraordinary curiosity and a mind that sought patterns and logic in everything. His parents noticed early on that their son had a restless intellect. He loved to read, not children's books but encyclopedias, reference guides, and biographies. By the age of 10, he had devoured nearly every volume of the World Book Encyclopedia that sat on the family bookshelf. At school, Bill was shy but extremely intelligent. He preferred spending time alone with his books and puzzles rather than playing outside. His sharpness sometimes made him impatient with slower learners, and teachers often described him as independent, intense, and deeply focused. Early education: Gates attended Lakeside School, a prestigious private preparatory school in Seattle. It was here that his life took a decisive turn. In 1968, Lakeside's Mothers Club used school fundraising money to buy a teletype Model 33 ASR terminal connected to a General Electric GE computer, a rare and expensive piece of technology for schools at that time. For 13-year-old Bill, that machine was love at first sight. It introduced him to the world of computer programming, and he quickly became obsessed. The terminal allowed students to write programs in BASIC, beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code, and Bill spent hours learning it. He even skipped math classes to spend time at the computer room, tinkering with code. The spark of programming it was at Lakeside that Gates met Paul Allen, a fellow student 2 years older than him. Both shared a fascination with computers and technology. Together they began experimenting with programming. They would spend late nights and weekends exploring how to make computers perform new tasks. Their early curiosity led them to exploit time-sharing systems, sometimes pushing the boundaries of rules, just to understand how computers functioned internally. When they were caught for overusing the computer lab time instead of punishment, they were offered a deal to help find bugs in the system's software. That moment was a turning point. It taught young Gates the power of problem-solving, logic, and the thrill of creation through code. He once said, "When you program a computer, you take something that doesn't exist and make it real." The birth of a lifelong partnership, Bill and Paul's friendship soon evolved into a technical partnership. They began forming small ventures to test their programming skills. Their first project was a scheduling program for their school, which automatically assigned students to classes. The program was so efficient that the school started using it permanently. Interestingly, young Gates manipulated the code slightly to ensure he was placed in classes with more girls, an early sign of both his cleverness and sense of humor. Early business ventures. By the time Gates turned 15, he and Paul Allen had already earned their first income from programming. In 1970, they created a company called Data, which analyzed traffic data using a small computer they built themselves. The business idea was to help local governments measure traffic flow. Although the company made only a modest profit, it gave the boys invaluable experience in hardware design, software programming, and business operations. Data was more than a teenage project. It was the seed that would later grow into Microsoft. Gates learned that writing code wasn't enough. Understanding customers, marketing, and product value was equally vital. Family support and influence. Gates' parents were initially concerned that their son's obsession with computers was making him isolated. However, they recognized his talent and curiosity. His mother, Mary, played a crucial role in shaping his leadership qualities and social responsibility. She often involved him in community events and charity work, teaching him the importance of contributing to society. His father encouraged intellectual debates at the dinner table, where Bill had to defend his opinions logically, a skill that later made him a formidable negotiator and leader in the business world. A vision beyond the ordinary. By his late teenage years, Bill Gates had already developed a unique worldview. He believed that technology could democratize power, giving ordinary people access to tools once reserved for large corporations or governments. This belief became the foundation of his life's mission. Even at 17, he would tell friends, "Someday, there will be a computer on every desk and in every home." At a time when computers were the size of rooms and cost tens of thousands of dollars, this statement sounded almost delusional. But for Bill, it was destiny. The turning point. Harvard awaits in 1973. Gates graduated from Lakeside School with high honors and exceptional SAT scores. He famously scored 800 out of 800 in math. That same year, he was accepted into Harvard University, one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. While his parents hoped he would follow his father's path into law, Bill had other ideas. Harvard offered him a vast new world of learning and opportunity. But what awaited him there would soon change the course of human history. Arrival at Harvard, a world of new possibilities. The autumn of 1973, Bill Gates stepped into the historic halls of Harvard University, one of the most prestigious academic institutions in the world. The campus, filled with the brightest minds of his generation, seemed like the perfect place for someone of Bill's intellectual energy and ambition. He was officially enrolled as a pre-law student, fulfilling his parents' hopes, but deep down, he had little interest in becoming a lawyer. What truly fascinated him was computing and problem-solving. Although Harvard was an academic haven, Bill's relationship with the university was unconventional. He rarely followed a strict routine, often staying up late reading textbooks, exploring programming opportunities, and engaging in marathon coding sessions on Harvard's mainframe computers. His dorm room in Currier House soon became a mini laboratory filled with punch cards, printouts, and computer terminals. Meeting Steve Ballmer. It was at Harvard that Gates met Steve Ballmer, an energetic and intelligent student with a passion for business and mathematics. Ballmer would later become Microsoft's CEO and one of Bill's closest allies in shaping the global software empire. The two shared long conversations about technology, innovation, and business strategy. Ballmer's enthusiasm complemented Gates's analytical and visionary nature. Even then, Bill was known for his sharp wit, tireless work ethic, and competitive personality. The spark of opportunity, the Altair 8800 in 1974. During his sophomore year, Bill's old friend Paul Allen visited him at Harvard. Paul, who had been working in Boston as a computer programmer, brought exciting news. The cover of popular electronics magazine featured the Altair 8800, a small, affordable computer kit produced by MIT's Micro-Instrumentation and Telemetry Systems. For Gates and Allen, this was the moment they had been waiting for. The Altair represented a paradigm shift, the beginning of personal computing. Until that point, computers were large, expensive machines, accessible only to corporations and universities. The Altair was the first glimpse of a world where every individual could own a computer. Bill immediately recognized the potential. "This is it," he told Allen. "This is what we've been talking about all these years." The leap of faith, writing BASIC for the Altair within days. Gates and Allen contacted MIT's and claimed they had developed a version of the BASIC programming language for the Altair, even though they hadn't yet written a single line of code. The company's president, Ed Roberts, was intrigued and invited them to demonstrate the software. In a marathon coding session lasting 8 weeks, working day and night, Gates and Allen wrote the software on Harvard's computers. With no Altair hardware available, they built an emulator to simulate the system's functions. It was a massive technical challenge, but their dedication and brilliance paid off. When Paul Allen flew to Albuquerque, New Mexico in early 1975 to present the program to MIT's, it worked flawlessly on the first try. The company immediately offered them a contract to distribute Altair BASIC, and in that moment, Microsoft was born, a blend of microcomputer and software. Leaving Harvard, Bill Gates now faced a life-altering decision. Harvard was a dream for his parents and a symbol of prestige. But Bill saw a greater dream, the dawn of a new era. He realized that computers would soon transform every aspect of life, from business to education. In 1975, after long discussions with his family, Gates decided to take a leave of absence from Harvard to fully commit to his startup with Paul Allen. He promised his parents that if things didn't work out, he would return to complete his degree. But deep inside, he knew he was never going back. The birth of Microsoft. Bill Gates and Paul Allen officially founded Microsoft on April 4, 1975, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where MIT's was based. Their first office was a modest space filled with computers, notes, and a whiteboard filled with ideas. Bill was only 19 years old, but he quickly established himself as the driving force of the company. He handled business negotiations, software licensing, and product design, all with precision and intensity. Allen focused on technical innovation and coding. Together, they made an unstoppable team. Their guiding vision was simple yet revolutionary, a computer on every desk and in every home, running Microsoft software. At a time when most people still saw computers as tools for scientists or hobbyists, this idea sounded almost ridiculous. But Gates' conviction never wavered. Early challenges, the first few years were difficult. Software piracy was rampant, and people freely shared Microsoft BASIC without paying for it. This deeply frustrated Bill. In 1976, he wrote an open letter titled "An Open Letter to Hobbyists," accusing users of stealing software and arguing that programmers deserve to be paid for their work. This letter became one of the earliest statements defining software as a commercial product, not just a hobby. It marked the beginning of the modern software industry. Despite the challenges, Microsoft's reputation grew. The company delivered software not only for the Altair, but for other emerging microcomputers. Their focus on compatibility and efficiency set them apart from competitors. Relocation to Seattle by 1979, Microsoft had grown rapidly. Gates decided to move the company headquarters back to Seattle, his hometown, to access better talent and be closer to family. This move symbolized the start of Microsoft's transformation from a small startup to a global technology company. Gates's leadership style began to emerge strongly. He was demanding, precise, and relentless. Employees later recalled how he personally reviewed every line of code and questioned every assumption. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," he would say bluntly, not out of arrogance, but to push his team to think deeper. He believed excellence was non-negotiable. His intensity was legendary, often working late into the night and expecting the same from everyone else. Building the team in these early years, Gates hired brilliant minds who shared his vision. Among them was Steve Ballmer, who joined Microsoft in 1980 as its first business manager. Ballmer's charisma and organizational strength balanced Gates' analytical leadership. Together, they built a corporate culture focused on innovation, discipline, and results, one that rewarded creativity but demanded perfection. The breakthrough: IBM comes calling in. 1980, Microsoft's fate changed forever. The world's largest computer company, IBM, was planning to enter the personal computer market. IBM needed an operating system for its new PC but didn't have time to build one from scratch. They approached Microsoft, not for an operating system, but for a programming language. Gates, however, saw an opportunity much bigger than that. He promised IBM that Microsoft could deliver a full operating system. At that time, Microsoft didn't even have one, but Bill's boldness and strategic thinking paid off. The company acquired an existing system called QDOS, Quick and Dirty Operating System, from a small firm named Seattle Computer Products. Microsoft modified and improved it, renaming it MS-DOS, Microsoft Disk Operating System. When IBM PCs launched in 1981 with MS-DOS pre-installed, the world of computing changed forever. Microsoft didn't sell the software outright. Instead, Gates negotiated a licensing deal, allowing Microsoft to retain ownership and sell the system to other manufacturers. This single decision was one of the smartest business moves in history. It ensured Microsoft's dominance as the personal computer revolution exploded throughout the 1980s. A new era begins, the IBM deal by 1981. The partnership between Microsoft and IBM had already begun to reshape the landscape of technology. The launch of the IBM personal computer, IBM PC, powered by Microsoft's MS-DOS, marked the dawn of a revolution that would soon reach every office, classroom, and home around the world. Bill Gates, only 26 years old at the time, had successfully positioned Microsoft at the very center of a new industry. But this was only the beginning. He understood that software, not hardware, was the future, and that whoever controlled the operating system would control the direction of computing itself. When IBM PCs hit the market, they were an instant success. Businesses adopted them rapidly for accounting, word processing, and data management. As IBM's influence spread, so did Microsoft's. Every computer sold with MS-DOS brought revenue to Gates' company and expanded its user base. By 1983, Microsoft had become the leading provider of personal computer software. Bill Gates' business philosophy: Bill Gates was not just a programmer, he was a strategist. His approach to business was shaped by three principles that defined Microsoft's rise. Control the standard. Gates believed that whoever defined the software standard for PCs would dominate the market. MS-DOS became that standard. Adapt quickly. He encouraged constant innovation, urging his teams to anticipate where the industry was heading rather than react to competitors. Work hard. Think harder. Gates' legendary work ethic became the company's culture. He demanded excellence and would personally review product details until they met his expectations. His management style was famously intense. Colleagues often described meetings where Gates would challenge every assumption, question every design, and argue fiercely until satisfied. Yet, despite his reputation for being demanding, many employees admired him for his clarity of vision and deep technical understanding. Entering the graphical age, Windows is born by the mid-1980s, computers were becoming more powerful, and users were beginning to expect more intuitive, user-friendly systems. The traditional command line interface of MS-DOS was functional but intimidating for many. Gates recognized that the future lay in graphical user interfaces, GUIs, inspired in part by innovations seen at Xerox PARC and later adopted by Apple with its Macintosh computer. In 1983, Microsoft announced the development of a new operating environment called Windows, a system that would allow users to interact with their computers using windows, icons and menus instead of text commands. The initial version, Windows 1.0, launched in 1985, but it was slow and limited. Critics dismissed it as a poor imitation of the Macintosh interface. However, Gates remained undeterred. He understood that technology adoption takes time and that the real success would come through persistence and iteration. He famously told his team, "We're not competing for what's happening this year. We're building what's going to matter in the next decade." This mindset became central to Microsoft's strategy, continuous improvement until dominance was inevitable. The Microsoft ecosystem expands during this period. Microsoft expanded beyond operating systems into productivity software. Gates saw that software applications would drive hardware demand and create user loyalty. In 1983, Microsoft released Word, followed by Excel in 1985, and later bundled them into what would become Microsoft Office. These tools transformed how people worked, bringing word processing, spreadsheets, and presentations into every workplace. The combination of MS-DOS, Windows, and Microsoft Office became an unstoppable trio, defining the experience of personal computing for decades. The team and the culture early 1980s were also a time of cultural formation for Microsoft. Gates cultivated an environment where intelligence and performance mattered above everything else. Employees were encouraged to question ideas, debate openly, and deliver results quickly. He rewarded creativity but demanded discipline. Weekly product reviews were grueling but effective. Gates would ask direct questions about performance, efficiency, and user experience, expecting clear and logical answers. Many later admitted that while working under Gates was exhausting, it pushed them to levels of excellence they had never imagined. Among his closest associates, Steve Ballmer stood out as the energetic force managing business operations and motivating teams. While Gates focused on long-term vision and technical leadership, their partnership created a balance between intensity and enthusiasm, driving Microsoft's relentless growth. Competition and controversy. Apple and beyond. One of Microsoft's biggest rivals in this era was Apple, led by Steve Jobs. Although Apple had introduced the first successful graphical interface with the Macintosh, its system was closed. Both hardware and software were controlled by Apple itself. Microsoft, in contrast, licensed its software to multiple PC manufacturers. This decision allowed Windows to reach a vastly wider audience, creating an open ecosystem that eventually overtook Apple in market share. However, the relationship between Gates and Jobs was complex, sometimes cooperative, sometimes combative. Microsoft had provided early software for the Macintosh, including Word and Excel. But when Windows began resembling the Mac interface, Apple accused Microsoft of copying its design. The dispute went to court in 1988, but Microsoft ultimately prevailed. The rivalry became legendary. Two visionary leaders, each determined to shape the future of technology in their own way. Microsoft goes public in March 1986. Microsoft held its initial public offering, IPO, offering shares at $21 each. The stock quickly rose in value, and Bill Gates, who owned 45% of the company, instantly became a multimillionaire. At only 31 years old, he was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in history. Yet rather than slowing down, the success only intensified his drive. Gates continued working long hours, focusing on new projects, and reinvesting profits into research and development. By 1987, Microsoft had become a powerhouse, employing thousands of people and generating hundreds of millions in annual revenue. Its influence extended across every sector where computers were used, from education to government to global business. Windows takes over the world. The real turning point came in 1990 with the release of Windows 3.0. It was faster, more stable, and visually appealing. This version finally realized Gates' vision of making personal computing accessible to everyone. Windows 3.0 sold more than 10 million copies in its first 2 years, a record for software at the time. Computer manufacturers worldwide pre-installed it on new machines, cementing Microsoft's position as the undisputed leader in the software industry. By the end of the 1980s, Microsoft was no longer a promising startup. It was the defining company of the digital age. Its software ran on more than 90% of the world's personal computers. Gates had transformed from a curious Harvard dropout into a global technology icon. Personal life in the 1980s, despite his growing fame, Gates maintained a relatively private personal life. He continued to live modestly in the Seattle area, spending most of his time at work. Known for his frugality and focus, he avoided extravagant lifestyles common among other millionaires. In 1987, during a Microsoft event in New York, he met Melinda French, a bright young product manager who would later become his wife. The two shared a passion for technology and intellectual conversation. Their relationship would eventually evolve into a partnership that extended beyond business to family and global philanthropy. The philosophy behind success. At the core of Bill Gates' success was a belief in practical innovation. The idea that technology should serve people, simplify tasks, and empower creativity. Unlike inventors who focus solely on discovery, Gates was obsessed with implementation and scalability. He often said, "It's not about being the first. It's about being the one who makes it work for everyone." This mindset allowed Microsoft to dominate emerging technologies by refining and perfecting them for the masses. Transition into the 1990s. By 1990, Microsoft had firmly established itself as the leader of the personal computer revolution. With Windows and Office dominating the market, Gates began to look ahead to networking, multimedia, and the Internet, which he believed would define the next era of computing. The young entrepreneur, who had dropped out of Harvard to chase a dream, was now leading one of the most influential companies on Earth. His vision of a computer on every desk and in every home was no longer a dream, it was a reality. Chapter 4. The Windows Empire and the Challenges of Success, 1990-2000. The dawn of a new decade. Microsoft rules the world. The 1990s opened with Microsoft standing firmly at the center of a technological revolution. The company's products, MS-DOS, Windows, and the Office suite, were now standard tools in homes, schools, and corporations around the globe. The personal computer was no longer a niche gadget. It had become an essential part of modern life. At the heart of this transformation stood Bill Gates, a soft-spoken yet unrelenting leader whose strategic mind and technical brilliance had reshaped an entire industry. By this point, Gates was recognized not merely as a businessman, but as the architect of the information age. His dream, a computer on every desk and in every home, was becoming reality. But as the company grew in influence, so did scrutiny, competition, and the complexity of leadership. Windows 3.1 and the expansion of the software empire. In 1992, Microsoft released Windows 3.1, an upgraded version of its earlier operating system. It introduced features such as TrueType fonts, multimedia support, and improved stability, making it the preferred platform for both consumers and businesses. The software's user-friendly interface helped millions of people transition into the digital world. For the first time, computing felt accessible to non-technical users. Gates' vision of democratizing technology was being realized at massive scale. Alongside Windows, Microsoft Office continued to dominate. Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Access became integral to everyday productivity. This combination, Windows and Office, created a digital ecosystem that locked users into Microsoft products, ensuring continued dominance. By 1993, Microsoft had surpassed $3 billion in annual revenue and employed over 15,000 people worldwide. Its influence was no longer limited to software. It was defining the modern workplace. Windows 95, the game changer. The true turning point came in August 1995 with the launch of Windows 95, one of the most significant product releases in technology history. For Gates, Windows 95 was more than just software, it was a symbol of progress. Years of research, programming, and design culminated in an operating system that revolutionized how users interacted with computers. Windows 95 introduced the Start menu, taskbar, and plug-and-play functionality, all of which remained fundamental to computing even today. It was visually appealing, faster, and designed to support the next generation of software applications. The marketing campaign was equally legendary. Microsoft spent over $300 million on promotions using the Rolling Stones song "Start Me Up" as its anthem. The midnight launch drew massive crowds around the world. Retail stores sold out within hours. Within just 5 weeks, Windows 95 sold 7 million copies, a record-breaking achievement. It became a cultural event, marking the moment when computers transitioned from tools for the few to companions for the many. The Internet Revolution, a late but powerful entry. Although Gates had foreseen the rise of personal computing, he initially underestimated the power of the Internet. In the early 1990s, Microsoft was focused on operating systems and local software, while companies like Netscape Communications were pioneering the web browser revolution. By 1994, the Internet was exploding in popularity, and Microsoft's absence from the space became increasingly visible. Gates realized this was not a passing trend but the next frontier. In 1995, he issued a company-wide memo titled "The Internet Tidal Wave," declaring the Internet as Microsoft's top priority. He quickly redirected the company's focus, and in 1996, Microsoft launched Internet Explorer bundled with Windows. This aggressive strategy transformed the browser landscape and triggered the famous browser wars with Netscape. Through continuous updates and integration with Windows, Internet Explorer rapidly overtook Netscape's market share, solidifying Microsoft's dominance in yet another domain. Philosophy and leadership style. In the 1990s, Microsoft grew into a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Bill Gates evolved from a hands-on coder into a visionary executive. Yet his core leadership principles remained unchanged: precision, discipline, and an obsession with excellence. He held weekly meetings where he personally reviewed projects, asked pointed technical questions, and demanded absolute clarity. Gates's piercing intellect and near-photographic memory intimidated even senior managers. Yet many described his intensity as the driving force behind Microsoft's success. He maintained a flat organizational structure, encouraging open dialogue and innovation. Employees were expected to think independently and challenge ideas, not just follow orders. Behind his relentless drive was a simple belief: don't compare yourself with anyone in this world. If you do so, you are insulting yourself. This attitude shaped Microsoft's competitive spirit and its ability to outthink and outwork rivals. Wealth and recognition. By the mid-1990s, Bill Gates had become the richest person in the world.